Parents, if you don't educate your children, there will not be peace in your family. And I'm not saying spend a lot of money on a school. I'm saying educate your children, beginning at the dinner table, teaching them morals, teaching them virtues. Everyone, welcome to the Father Leo Show, where we are dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, I want to talk a little bit about peace, because we say it all the time. I know that I had a little conversation about the sign of peace, but I want to give you just a little bit of a way to understand peace in a theological way, just because I think we're trying to establish peace only in a sociological way, where we think of it as just an absence of war, an absence of arguing, an absence of violence. And those are slight indicators of peace. But let's just admit, the Cold War, there wasn't a lot of war happening, but there also wasn't a lot of communication. But it also meant that there wasn't a lot of peace. And I think couples and families, you all know that you could be living in the house with someone and not talk to anyone. There will be no violence, no yelling, but there's really little peace. And what's interesting about peace is that it's one of the first words that Jesus says to us, especially after his resurrection, when he experienced a tremendous violent death, and he tells his disciples, don't be afraid, peace be with you. So I gave this homily, and so, yep, I'm recycling. It happens. I want to give you this little kind of way to understand a Christological peace. And peace, P-E-A-C-E, begins with P, prayer. And I know that it sounds corny, and I'm not saying it just because I'm a priest, but I'm saying it because even psychologists have said that prayer does something to the brain. Meditation and contemplation truly affects the brain. You know, it kind of increases a peacefulness and at the same time reduces a stress, because it lets you know that you will be okay. And only God can do that. And the only way you're going to know that is if you actually talk to God. That's called prayer. E, education. I tell families that, parents, you are the primary educators of your children. And let's admit, especially with all the craziness that we're seeing from very liberal-minded school boards, where they're trying to be inclusive, but they're really creating chaos in children's minds by trying to indoctrinate them with a whole lesson plan and an ideology that confuses biology and psychology and sociology. You know what I'm talking about. We're talking about the whole trans debate. I'm not quite sure why that has to be brought up in a first and second grade education level, but I can tell you it's not giving peace to your children. Education is the key to peace, because education teaches critical thinking skills, something that community doesn't really want to use. They want to base it off on feelings as opposed to facts. And let's just say that feelings is something that we need to be educated in, because we're all going to experience confusion. But an educated person who has critical thinking skills, and by the way, when I say education, I'm not talking about a degree, because I'm embarrassed by what some of these higher educational institutions are producing. You're giving degrees to people. They're spending tons of money on it, but they don't walk out educated. They can't even string together logical thought processes, much less have a conversation with someone without wanting to scream, rant, and rave and just have a riot. And that's just because the education system is so messed up. Parents, if you don't educate your children, there will not be peace in your family. And I'm not saying spend a lot of money on a school. I'm saying educate your children, beginning at the dinner table, teaching them morals, teaching them virtues. A, P as in prayer, E as in educate. A, adapt. People who can't adapt, people who are not willing to be flexible, experience very little peace in their life. In their rigidity, if a pressure comes, they snap. A great example of adaptability is a bridge. It is strong enough, but flexible enough to take the pressure. Our adaptability basically means that we are able to learn something new. I pray this prayer pretty regularly. Lord, help me to be an old dog willing to learn new tricks. That means, can I adapt to different situations and be able to pull back without reacting and just listen first before I can make a response? That adaptability will help us to experience peace because we're going to be thrown a bunch of new and challenging situations. Sometimes because God allows the devil to do it, or because God is pulling us into new situations so that we can grow. That's just adapting. C is going to be about being careful, which basically means full of care, means being compassionate. I think peaceful people are caring people. But if we are so overly careful to the point where we're becoming cowards, then we have to know that being careful really means that we are being courageous. So care and courageous is how you experience peace, because it basically is saying that I have enough peace in my life that I care for those who don't have it, and I'm going to be courageous enough to try to bring a little bit of peace into that situation. I look, for example, at Mother Teresa. The story is that there was war between two sides, but she had to get to some people to minister to them, and she prayed for that Christmas miracle. And guess what? It happened that there was literally a ceasefire because Mother Teresa was willing to pray for it, and she was careful, but she wasn't a coward. And I think careful people are also courageous. And then the final E is to be encouraging. Encourage. This means literally to put your heart into someone, to put your heart into it. That's why if you are discouraged, your heart feels like it's being pulled out of you. So people who are peaceful are encouraging people. You know, I look at, for example, and I've got to be better at this myself, like working with my food truck staff. If I'm trying to teach them, I can't fly off the handle. I can't lose my patience. I've got to encourage them. I look at a good coach that doesn't just lose his or her temper, but they will encourage. They will do what they can to put their heart back into someone. And I love this because when Jesus says, peace be with you, he was encouraging us through his Eucharist. He's literally putting his heart into our hearts. I mean, that's what the Eucharistic miracles taught us, that those pieces of bread that turned into flesh, they studied that in scientific labs and they discovered that it was a piece of a man's heart. It's pretty impressive to know that Jesus, who says, peace be with you, was literally giving us his heart. So I know that peace is something that we all pray for, but I don't know if we have a practical way of understanding it. Hopefully this little episode gives you a perspective, a way to think about peace. And I hope that this community will give you some of that as well. So if you want to support the work that we do, you can find that information on our website, thefatherleoshow.com, because when you support us, you're going to help us to create more content for you, but also it'll give you access to some pretty cool perks and some extra content, which I know will definitely fill your mind with that peace, knowing that you are not alone in this crazy world. We're a community to help you get through it all. So join us for another episode of the Father Leo Show, where we're dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And between now and then, stay hungry for God.